So, Joey, today I've gathered up a mixtape of stories for us to cover. And this covers NICAP. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for. I don't remember.
Okay.
Along with MUFON and Project Blue Book, the Humanoid Encounters series. The author did an absolutely fantastic job, and I can't tell you how much this series has inspired Black Cat Report of just me sitting down here on the couch, grabbing a random book, flipping through until I find something that kind of piques my interest and diving in. It's one of the best reference series that I've ever come across. I didn't see you there.
It all started early this morning.
From hunting ghosts to Bigfoot, UFOs,
Cryptids, true crime, paranormal, and more.
I've always wanted to see a UFO.
Oh, I was researching for your entertainment.
That's Bigfoot's guy.
He basically wrote the book on modern cult.
We aren't really comedians.
What if Buddha did cocaine?
The Addams Family on meth. This is the Black Cat Report.
See you on the other side. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 115 of the Black Cat Report. My name is Gil, and joining me here today is the only man who ever ran for mayor of Culpeper while also being technically registered as the mayor of Culpeper while facing an indictment as the mayor of Culpeper, Joey Lee, which I need to add here, the last remaining member of the Bruce Lee family. Joey, how are you doing today, bud?
You know, it's really sad when Bruce Lee died. And then his son
Grandpa Lee
actually died too. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is so sad. It's like a snake-bitten family, you know, kind of sad.
Very poetic.
But, you know, honestly, as mayor of Culpeper, if you guys don't get this joke about all the Culpeper jokes, I'm from, alleged. I'm from Culpeper, Virginia, this small town. It's like pretty much straight south of D.C., about an hour and a half. And when I grew up, you know, in the 90s, it didn't have a Walmart. It was super small. It's like very rural, lots of cows, lots of
It's another level of rural is like didn't have a Walmart. That's like a whole like whoa, like people know what you mean.
That's a less than rural. Yeah. That's how I always explain this town.
That's just rural.
That's rural. It's not rural. It's rural. You know, you lose the oral. You know, the all part of it. But you know, they actually don't have a Build-A-Bear. So when I had to go to Build-A-Bear last week, I was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is about 45 minutes away. And luckily, I got kicked out of that one, so I can go to the one in Asheville.
I'm always concerned when somebody starts a story with, luckily, I got kicked out of that one.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to go any farther to the other ones that I've gotten kicked out of, but...
Well, that's for episode 116 and 17. Y'all will find out.
Yeah, you got to keep waiting.
Well, Joey Bear, if I can say, if I could be so bold as to say that, today, in line with us kind of getting back on track with things, kind of like getting our foot back into the races. I don't know if that's a metaphor, but I just made it one, so deal with it. What I did was I went through the series of humanoid collections, right, or the Humanoid Encounters, the collection of Humanoid Encounters, along with NICAP, which is a UFO reporting center, along with MUFON, another UFO reporting center, Project Blue Book. How are you still listening to the show if you don't know what Project Blue Book is? And just a series of different case reports, case studies. And I kind of like cherry picked, right? Much like Jane Roberts going through religions last week, I just kind of cherry picked the ones that I really wanted to, that really stood out to me. And I grabbed about 6 or 7 stories that admittedly, I've come across in the past and I've kept bookmarked. But truth is, no matter how much I looked into them, I couldn't find shit. I couldn't find shit besides these original cases. So they just kind of sat on the back burner as like, man, I'd really love to cover them. I think these are fascinating. They're interesting. They're unique. They're, what have you. But we've never, they've never had enough substance to kind of merit their own full-on deep dive episode the way that we tend to. And last week, you kind of got your feet wet with editing. This week, I'm going to be getting my feet, wet with editing. And so I was like, all right, grab a bunch of cases, gonna throw them into the mix. We're gonna go through, gonna read them, and it'll be my way to get back into editing before we release a series, which we had been working on at this point well over a month ago, and actually start getting back into that, which requires like a shit ton of production and editing and research and work. All right, so 1950. Dr.Botta Entris Flying Saucer. Depiction of inside alien spaceship. Many reports of UFO encounters made by single individuals are often given little weight by most investigators. However, when that one person is of high esteem and credibility, the case is given much weight, such as the case with alien encounter that occurred in 1950 in South America. The lone witness, Dr. Enrique Carentuno Botta, who passed his incredible story to Horacio Gonzalez Z in Caracas at a UFO conference in 1955. Dr. Botta would soon give permission to Horacio G to relate the story to famed UFO researcher Leon Stringfield. The researcher would release the details of the Botta encounter in his book, Situation Red. At the time of the encounter, Dr. Botta was a man of 40 years old. He was well educated and respected by all who knew him. He was an ex-war pilot and aeronautical engineer. He was employed as an architectural engineer working with a well-known company in Caracas in 1950. His job had placed him in Argentina, working on a large construction project when he would be involved in the most bizarre event of his life. Botta was driving down the highway about 75 miles from his hotel in an isolated area known as Bahia Blanca when he saw a metallic disc-shaped object sitting on the grass just off the road. He stopped his car to watch the object for a few minutes to see what would happen. After seeing no sign of movement, he decided to get even closer to the unknown object. This vantage point allowed him to see an opening or doorway in the object's side. He decided to go inside. At first, the craft's inside seemed empty, except for a blinking red light in a domed top. As he ventured further inside, he saw a curved divan with 4 seats. 3 of these seats were occupied with small beings about 4 feet tall with gray, tight-fitting overalls. The 3 small creatures were facing a control panel. It consisted of lights, gauges, and meters of different types. Standing quietly behind them, Botta could not resist the urge to touch one of the small beings. As he did, he felt a rigid, charred texture. The 3 strange creatures were dead. All within a moment, he rushed from the saucer onto his car and was speeding down the highway. Arriving at his hotel, he related his strange experience to 2 of his closest friends. But men armed themselves with weapons and decided to return to the scene of Botta's encounter. However, being almost dark and the area being so isolated, they changed their minds and opted for the next morning to do their search. In other words, they got scared and fucking left. Early the next day, Botta led the 3 directly to the spot of the previous day's unusual encounter, but there was no craft there now. All that was found at the site the object had occupied was a pile of ashes. One of the men scooped some up. Immediately, his hand turned purple and remained that way for several days. The 3 men, discouraged by the absence of the object, began to look around the area to see if any other evidence of its landing could be found. One of the men looked up and saw 3 objects in the sky. One of the largest of the three was cigar-shaped, while the two smaller objects were disc-shaped. Dr. Botta hurriedly took 5 pictures of the objects, of which only 2 showed vague images of the objects. Soon, the 2 smaller objects joined the cigar-shaped flying object. The 3 became one, turned blood red, and quickly disappeared from view. Dr. Botta would later relate more details of his observations on the day of the incident. He'd recall that he saw vents or the holes in the floor of the object. The control panel had a transparent sphere above it which rotated. The rigidness of the alien's skin was an indication to him that they had died in a crash or malfunction. He also was amazed at the skin of the saucer, which was metallic in appearance but had a rubbery feel to it. Immediately after the encounter, Dr. Botta came down with a fever, and his skin was blistered. Doctors were unable to discover the origin of either ailment. The symptoms lasted for several weeks. He also had an impression of the sunglasses he wore into the craft on his face. A test showed no sign of radiation. Botta kept the details of his strange encounter private except for his 2 companions, Horatio Gonzalez G. and Leon Stringfield, although the details of the strange happenings in Argentina seem most improbable. The character and reputation of Botta make this case extremely difficult to discount. The person who collected this story, who we're going to be quoting from a lot, has a name Joey and I are going to love. Their name, B.J. Booth.
Best kind of Booth.
Source, Leon Stringfield. Situation read, page 80. Now, there's...
Is he related to Glory Hole?
Yes. Ran by Robert F. Butts.
Hey, you know.
Oh, poor Robert. No,
I've got a lot of thoughts about that story, but please go ahead.
Continue. Go ahead. Jump into it.
All right. Well, have you ever noticed, and this is kind of something I noticed, the more we talk about stories from UFOs and people's experiences and experiencers, there's always 3 aliens.
Holy shit, you're fucking right.
Brooklyn Bridge.
You are fucking right.
Brooklyn Bridge was 3. This one was 3. Trinity was 3. It's like, I mean, it's a trinity, right? Which is a crazy thing I've started noticing on all these. It's like there's always 3 aliens. And I was like, is that, thinking into this, is that what it takes to drive these UFOs? Is that just a good number? You know, like, is the Trinity just a good number, as you can even say from the name of the nuclear bomb testing site and from the, UFO experience at that point? It's kind of interesting.
No, there was a lot of ways I thought you'd go with that. And as is tradition, you took it in a way that I did not expect. That's a damn good point. I never would have thought of that. That's you're right. I don't know of a single case, and this includes a lot of cases that I've read about and I've just never told you about. You know, I mean, you know that I do this shit as a hobby too. Like, I just dig into this shit. This is you guys are just hearing an expression of my mind in my free time when it comes to aliens and episodes, right? Like, I'm like, that's just what I do normally. You're fucking right.
Quasga, same thing. He had 2 companions.
No, he had 3 or 4. It's always, the one caveat I would throw onto yours, onto your observation here, which is very astute, it's very solid, is it's at least 3, bare minimum 3, right? There'll be more sometimes, and then it gets into variations of the tall whites, the tall grays, the short, tall, gray whites. You know, like it's always like it expands at some point. But no, you are 100. You are 100% right. It's always it's a minimum of 1, but I've never seen 2.
Yeah,
it's like it goes from 1 to 3 and up. Like that's it. You know.
I guess these aliens are not trying to practice solo girl summer. They're really trying to do some like cuffing season fall, you know, winter cuffing season, stuff like that. So these aliens are really like, I don't know. It is more fun sometimes to travel with other people. And so maybe the aliens are just like, hey, bruh, want to go to Earth? Let's go check up on these Earthlings and see what they're doing. But
I can see that. I know from like road trips I've been on, it's always like there's that one person who refuses outright to let other people drive the car, which is fine. If I can go for 47 hours straight, don't worry, you guys. You always have to have that one passenger that's like awake for the driver who should not be still driving. Like legally, they are impaired with like sleep deprivation at that point. And 3 is a good number for that. You can trade off in shifts, you know, between gas stations, right?
Way stations. Yeah.
This makes sense. Yeah, this tracks. This makes sense. There's also, and a lot of these early stories. Check the year real quick. This is 1955. Okay, so this is an important distinction, right, for the UFO lovers out there, right, who are tracking the trends of UFO history as something where it's like they actually legitimately care about it, and they're like there's a legitimate history to it, and it's something we should harness, care about, and believe, and like dedicate time to.
UFOs are for lovers, for sure.
Well, yeah, just like Ohio, everybody knows that. Which
also
got a lot of Ohio love in this series, by the way. There's a lot of Ohio cases coming up because there's one thing that I know for certain, which is all strange roads lead to Ohio or come from Ohio. It's hard to tell sometimes, but the point is Ohio's at one of the ends of the
state
spectrum.
motto.
But just like Ohio, it's somewhere on the spectrum.
That's also their state motto.
But no, they mentioned cigar-shaped craft, right? And a lot of the early, like 1947 onwards, like kind of like flying saucers, right? It was all UFOs, right? It was, there we go. It's all that kind of shit. When in actuality, a lot of the actual UFO, this is a fake photo, by the way. The whole, like, I want to believe now thanks to me, the I already believe poster, which isn't available for anybody. Go fucking figure out how to custom print it yourself. I'll send you the file if you want. But we're so bad with merch. We're so bad with merch.
Yeah, I know, right?
Print it yourself. But no, a lot of the early UFO cases, especially where the term flying saucer came from, right, with Kenneth Arnold and the sighting over Mount Rainier, yada, 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 all that bullshit, it was flying saucers, which was a misnomer. It was not saying that the crafts looked like plates upside down, that they looked like saucers. In actuality, the earliest and continuous description of UFOs is actually cigars. They look like propane tanks moving through the fucking sky. They look like the big ass fucking propane tanks you see on the side of houses out in the country, right? That's what they look like. They don't look like this, which I'm gonna knock down at some point during the recording of all of this. They don't look like that. So it's always a hallmark to me when I go back to these old cases and they're like, and it's like, it's 1955. This is less than 10 years after UFOs and flying saucers and all that shit kind of like hit the media and became a thing. And they were like, no, it doesn't look anything like that. It actually looks like insert phrasing, which will continue on for the next almost 100 years. Like
airship, like we learned in our Wild West one.
Yeah.
It's an airship. That's what they used to say.
But that's the phrasing that like sticks with me, where I'm just kind of like, like I'm going to pay attention to this case, not because I believe it, but because the very foundation was, it was an argument against the expectations at the time. They didn't back down from it. They held to their guns, and in the end, it has proven true, which I'm not going to say means that it's true, but I will 100% say it increases the likelihood, like 100%, where it's just like, well, later on, they're like, no, that's what it was. And it's like, actually, that's the best of modern day science and radar. And, like all this shit is saying, actually, they're right. 60, 70, 80 years later.
I mean, it's just got to be a bunch of Winston Churchills out there being like, that's a cigar. Obviously a cigar. I'm like, why can't they just been like, you know what? It's a Milky Way bar, They had those back then, I think. Right?
Riding that Milky Way.
It's a microphone. I don't know. Like, there's a million ways you can go with this. Just like when one of our, who was the reader, or who was one of our listeners that said it was a Dorito?
It was Dragon Paw. Dragon Paw.
And I was like, genius. It does look like a freaking Dorito. And hence, Gil got sent a billion different Doritos, which is awesome.
Yes, I'm very grateful for the folks who sent me hurricane relief in the form of a lot of things, but the folks who sent me a 40-pack of Doritos. Like, this wasn't like a single pack of Doritos.
Yeah.
This was 40 individual bags of Doritos, and when I got the box, I was like, I thought that it was like a respirator so I could deal with black mold growing in my house and cleaning fluid and all this other shit. And I pull out my knife, I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, all right, what do we got in the mail today? And then it was 40 fucking bags of Doritos, and I was like, Jesus titty fucking Christ, I don't eat this many chips. I don't know what to do with this. So half of those chips are now at Joey's house for his pleasure.
They were.
You ate them?
I still have some left.
I'm worried about your gut. All right, brother.
Hey, when you drink, you need some extra food.
Yeah. Well, our next story is at Seat Pleasant, Maryland. You like that transition there? I don't. August 1952, UFO with Occupant. UFO depiction. Sometime in August 1952, during the major UFO sighting wave of that year, Mrs. Suzanne E. Knight, a young housewife and mother, saw a UFO at close range with what appeared to be an occupant aboard. About 9:30 p.m. on that hot summer evening, Mrs. Knight was in her kitchen when she heard a peculiar in quotes noise, apparently against the screen of the kitchen window. The noise was repeated several times, and thinking it was a large insect, she went to the window and looked out. She saw a bright object descending rapidly at 45-degree angle and thought it was a plane about to crash. Instead, the object came to a hovering position at a right angle to her, approximately half a city block away and about 300 feet above the ground. The UFO appeared to Mrs. Knight to resemble the wingless fuselage of a plane and was dull silver in color. Something similar to smoke was coming from the rear. They've said that about me on a few Saturday nights, if you ask me. Oh, no, I don't. Anyways.
After you had a bunch of refried beans.
After all that Doritos. The side of the object facing Mrs. Knight was lined with a number of square windows through which a brilliant yellow light was shining. On top and to the front of the object where left was a small red light extended somewhat above the body. On the underside of the UFO was an undercarriage similar to the gondola of a dirigible. This also contained a row of smaller square windows and was brilliantly aglow inside with yellow light. Mrs. Knight thought she observed what appeared to be rows of seats, similar to theater seats in this low portion. If anybody has ridden the ferry, the Staten Island ferry, right, and you know that there are seats along the sides of the Staten Island ferry where you can just like sit, you can watch the Statue of Liberty and Hudson Bay and yada, yada, yada. You know what I'm saying? You could just like cruise along in the harbor in New York. And the seats aren't facing front towards where the pilot's facing or the captain of the ship, but they're facing outwards. And you can either watch the skyline of the city or you can watch the Statue of Liberty. That's basically what she's experiencing with the UFO. She's just like, oh my Lord, and then it's just like, and it's just like a shit ton of tourists just. That's what she's watching right now. Well, through the upper windows, she was able to see what appeared to be a row of cabinets with slanted tops. Basically, she had a really good view in these windows. Quote, there was a man in front, end quote. Mrs. Knight wrote in her report to NICAP, quote, looking straight ahead towards the front, to her left, I couldn't understand what he was looking at so intensely, and not moving either. I expected to see a lot of instruments or dials, etc., similar to instrument panels on airplanes, but there were none that I could see, end quote. She said that the bright yellow glow in the object made everything inside look yellow, quote, even the man, end quote. This occupant wore a kind of helmet and, quote, around his arm and the side of his helmet, next to his face, there seemed to be a shadow or dark line, kind of looking like a Bob Dylan profile, if you ask me. I made up that last part, end quote. After watching for a minute or so, Mrs. Knight left the window to phone the newspaper, but she was unable to get an answer. When she returned to the window, the object was still there, but the man had disappeared and the undercarriage was no longer visible. Quote, I thought maybe it had moved up into the fuselage because not even an outline of the car was visible, but it should have been because the street light would have shown it, end quote. At that point, the lights in the object were abruptly extinguished and the UFO turned from a dull silver color to a glowing red, quote, like the door of an old pot-bellied stove, end quote. Every female character on this show is Linda Belcher,
like
if you don't know by now.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Well, you're just doing an effective northeastern accent.
Yeah, Betty Andreessen is Linda Belcher, and I'm...
Correct, yes.
Oh, Bobby.
Oh, Bobby.
Oh, my God. And you know what? Fuck it, I love it. It also began to rock toward and away from the witness and gave the appearance of being, quote, wavy, like water running over a rock or like heat waves coming out of an electric toaster, end quote. That is an incredibly specific observation. She then began calling for someone else in the house to come and see the object, but while she was looking for her sister, the object departed. Altogether, the incident had lasted approximately 3 minutes, at least 2 minutes of which Mrs. Knight had the object in clear view. The witness told her sister of what she had seen, omitting the detail about the occupant, brackets, she was certain her sister would disbelieve her, and brackets. The sister displayed disinterest and a certain degree of skepticism. So Mrs. Knight ceased to talk of it. She forgot the incident until a number of years later when she told her husband and children. The report came to the attention of NICAP, and Mrs. Knight made out a full report in September 1967 following this. She has been interviewed further by a member of the Capital Area NICAP subcommittee. Mrs. Knight held a responsible job in Prince George County. This was brought to you by NICAP.org, along with UFOcasebook.com/seat pleasant 1952.html.
I just want to make a few points to this too, and I'm glad that you brought the story up, and I'm, her candor and her descriptions of the ship and the occupant were interesting. First off, Miss Knight, I do want to say that jaundice is not a joke. His yellowish tone on his skin is not his fault, okay? The occupant's fault. He or she, whatever the occupant was. And so I know that sometimes that just happens and you got to deal with it, and it's a life thing. But also, why were you looking at the undercarriage? Like, come on, like, eyes up here, okay? Eyes up. I know the light was shining on it, but still, that's not always what you go first for.
I'm worried about Mr. Knight.
I wonder what Mr. Knight was doing at this point.
We all do.
It was just Mr. Knight in the freaking ship. He was the one flying. She did a good job about, the measurements, because she used the old American terminology where she never used kilometers.
Hell no.
And she said it's about a half a city block away. It's about 300 feet up. And she's like, well, I'm going to use anything. It's 2 washing machines long, 4,000 cheeseburgers at the Pythagorean theorem.
Yes.
Away from me. So, she's doing that as well. But she did a great job in decrying, I guess, in a way of like, here's where the details changed, here's what was happening, here's what was moving, where the light was changing, that the occupant was there, the occupant wasn't there. And did she say there was cabinets in the spaceship?
Specifically, she saw cabinets in the spaceship with slanted tops on them. Not just cabinets, my friend. She outlined the design structure of the cabinets.
She must have an eagle eye, or she's like, because it was 300. It was a half a city block away, right? So I'm trying to think about how big this thing needs to be.
Some big cabinets.
Yeah, for you to look through and see the cabinets in there while she's staring at this thing's undercarriage, and maybe she was, I don't know. Like, this is very interesting to. A detail in this UFO case, honestly. I can see why people were just like, yeah, it may be a little weird that you saw this by yourself and no one else saw this, but I mean, you can't ever count out people's experiences for the most part, because it's hard to know what people see in certain situations, as we know what we've been through in the last month. So it's like, it's hard to you can't discount people's experiences for the most part. And from her, seems like doesn't seem like she's been described as crazy in the last few years, or it's never been proved that she's been in an insane asylum, or she's been whatever. But
it's never been proved that she was in an insane
I
asylum.
choose my words carefully.
As far as I know, it hasn't. Mrs.
I choose my words carefully.
No, you did, and I quote my words specifically. But
quote.
No, but you're 100% right. I appreciate your take on that. Something stands out. The description of the fuselage, which we have to take things into terms. So in the to throw it back almost 100 years at this fucking point, because we old in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Folks did know what the fuck they were talking about when they were saying fuselage, because either they themselves or their partners, right, so their husbands or wives, worked in what would later be called the Air Force. So, that terminology, when goddamn near half the fucking country was recruited, right, or drafted into the military, fuselage was a household term. Now it's kind of like, God, that is oddly specific. Like, that seems really weird when I hear it now, but I have to take it into context of how many folks back then, their husband was sitting there staring at a fucking airplane who was like working in the Navy or working in the Air Force, in the Army Air Force before it was the Air Force. And they were like, that's a fuselage. Like, and they were pointing at, like, people knew what the fuck that was. So that wasn't a weird description.
Yeah.
Now, a fuselage looks like a large cigar, looks like a large propane tank.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very long and oblong object, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very specific shape to say something looks like. It's like, yeah, it looks like a giant propane tank. That's basically what they're saying. She said that, but she also said something that like kind of tipped me off into like giving her more credit, even though she's always Linda Belcher in my head. It was her sister downplayed it, and she decided to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
That, I don't know. People could always tiptoe past like kind of like hearing some shit and then later on being like, fuck it, I'm going to try this scam once again. And they could yada, yada, yada. It's 100% a thing. I'm not dismissing that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. Around this time period, there are a lot of sightings that come up all around the world of people claiming that they were able to see into the craft.
Mm-hmm.
That they were able to see things like cabinets. She's not the only one. This shit was happening on a regular basis. This is way before the internet. I would be shocked if she had any clue that people in South Africa or Australia or in parts of Europe were also saying that they were able to see within craft and see things like cabinets at the same time. I don't know if they're alien. Might be some crazy government shit. Maybe the government was able to make a UFO and still not get past the technology of cabinets. I don't know. But this was a fucking thing.
Pretty universal cabinets are, though.
Are they?
I would say so.
Are they?
It's literally something that you have that closes, that has shells, that opens, is used to hold things.
I don't know.
So I guess just the idea is universal. It could look complete. I mean,
sweet, simple Joey.
I don't know. I like the idea of cabinets, and I was thinking about it as like, when were cabinets invented? They had to be invented in like 180 or something like that.
Don't want to live in a world without cabinets.
I mean, the people that are doing the open concept are definitely trying to make us live in a world without cabinets. They're like, nothing's a cabinet, but everything's a cabinet.
Really, if you think about it, aren't we all cabinets? Our next story is called the Loch Ravine Dam Incident in 1958. On October 26, 1958, near the Loch Ravine Dam, north of Baltimore, two men were traveling in a car. As they approached a bridge, which probably doesn't exist after the tragic Baltimore Bridge collapse earlier this year,
R.I.P.,
they saw what appeared to be a flattened out, egg-shaped object hovering approximately 100 to 150 feet above the top of the bridge. Slowing their vehicle to get a better look, they approached about 75 foot from the bridge. Suddenly, the car went completely dead. The two men stated it was like they just cut the key off. Nothing electrical worked. The driver attempted to restart the engine, but to no avail. The object and the malfunction of their vehicle frightened the men to the point that they had hid behind the car. It's got to be really bad for you to get out of your car and go hide behind it.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to... shit! And they just like open up the doors, close the doors because they're proper gentlemen, and then ran and hid behind the car.
Because that'll be...
I laugh, but this shit's terrifying.
Uh-huh.
They were able to closely watch the UFO for 30 to 45 seconds. All at once, the object flashed a white light, causing the two witnesses to feel heat on their faces. The flash was accompanied by a loud sound like thunder. The UFO now began to slowly raise straight up. was extremely bright as it did, causing the edge of the object to be fuzzy. Within 5 to 10 seconds, the object was out of sight. Men were then able to restart the car and rush to the nearest phone to report their sighting. The Ground Observer Corps was contacted first, but did not respond. The men then talked to the Townsend Police Department, which sent 2 patrolmen to the scene. The 2 men soon began to experience a burning sensation on their skin and went to St. Joseph's Hospital in Baltimore for treatment. They were examined and each man returned to his home. Follow-up investigation would reveal some more details of the incident. The bridge was double-arched, about 40 foot tall and 500 feet long. The distance from the witnesses to the object was estimated at about 3/4 of a mile. Also, there was no unusual atmospheric conditions at the time, and the skies were clear. Project Blue Book investigated the case, but found no absolute cause for the appearance of the object. The case remains unidentified, although the Air Force did state that the object constituted no security threat to the United States. The 2 witnesses would subsequently be identified as Philip Small and Alvin Cohen. Written by B.J. Booth. Source and references, Project Blue Book. Over and over and over again, like sunburns in the middle of the fucking night. More or less, if you really had to simplify it down. I mean, it could be radiation, could be an unknown form of radiation, any number of things, but like sunburns in the middle of the night accompany UFO observations. Yeah. Like the amount of times that people are like, I was wearing a hat, or I was wearing a beanie, or I was wearing earmuffs or whatever. And it's just like people get like straight up like burned. Like when you see somebody who like, I don't know, wears some clothes or something to the beach and it's like really obvious what they were wearing, like the shape of their thong or the shape of their boxers or like whatever the fuck it happens to be. It's like, oh my God, I can see your tan lines. Like I literally know what you were wearing based off of how bad you were burnt. It is that, but it's like at nighttime. Right. And like, that's what these folks experience. That's what, Linda Belcher in the last, Mrs. Knight in the last story, like also experienced, where it's like they straight up experience like burns on their face, which something else. And I stand by this. One of the, I don't know what the fuck it is, but one of the givens, for a close encounter experience is pink eye. It's popped up over and over again. Folks that have close encounters with UFOs and they get these radiation burns and shit like almost every fucking time. Yeah, develop pink eye. I don't know why.
They're getting pink eye as much as their lives are getting shit on just for saying that they've seen a UFO.
That tracks.
Which is very sad, honestly. Gil, I'm not trying to deviate us, but I just wanted to throw in a little commercial here.
Please deviate us.
I feel like I've been doing that all night, and I've been not being able to keep on topic. But I wanted to. You're talking about sunburns. You're talking about people being at night, and But for other people, they get sunburned during the day, and you have. A lot of people have pools, like LA area, Astral area.
A lot of people have pools.
A lot of big areas. They have pools. They have pools. I am starting a new company, and it's called Tuxedo Speedo. And men will come out in your pool, and people that I know, and they will be wearing Tuxedo Speedos to clean out your pool. There'll be different packages where they can clean your pool. And what they do for you get the VIP package. They'll bring you like champagne. They'll clean the pool while you're out there. They'll give you shade and stuff like that. And, there's like small packages where you can do like, they just basically come clean your pool, basically the basic package.
Pool boys, if you will.
This was pool boys. But I just wanted to just throw that out there. It was a new company I was thinking about, Tuxedo Speedo, and they will clean your pools for you. So just, in a Speedo. So thank you, Gil, for letting me throw my business hat on for a minute.
Any goddamn time. Their slogan, I want to bulge.
Yes. And also our slogan is, we'll clean your pools. It's straight and basic and easy. Yep.
Straight,
I just made it
basic, easy.
Easy. That's also part of the package. The biggest thing I want to say about this story, to hop back on the track, is I appreciate that they didn't say cigar-shaped. They went out of left field and said it was an elongated egg. Instead of saying, I love that that's how they described it. And I'm like, thank you.
Yes.
Everyone else gets cigar-shaped. It's an elongated egg. That guy who saw it was sitting at home, and he's
I
just
don't want
quit
my
smoking
grandma
cigars.
to know I've smoked tobacco.
Yep. He just quit smoking cigars too, and he's thinking about this long, nice cigar that he can just smoke. And then they come and is like, "What was it shaped?" And then he goes through this whole mind, thought. His mind thought, as I'll say, like handbook. His mind thought.
Yes.
A big mind thought, and he just went there and just saw himself smoking a cigar, and then he woke up, and his like wife or friend or husband, whoever was significant other, was cooking him eggs, and he was like, elongated egg.
Fucking love it. Now, next, Joey. Fostoria, Ohio, late October 1977. Probably another anniversary today. Close encounter with a train. Twice a day, the C&O Railroad sent a trainload of 35 to 40 empty boxcars north out of Columbus, Ohio, to pick up processed food at the Fostoria Distribution Company warehouse, 3 to 3.5 miles north of Fostoria, Ohio. By the way, this is one of the only recorded cases. There's like 3 of UFOs and trains, so enjoy. The warehouse is located on the north side of Jones Road and east of 3 main line tracks. U.S. Route 23 is located over 200 yards to the west of and parallel to the tracks. A church sits on the east side of Route 23. In order for the train to move the boxcar load into the warehouse, the front part of the train must operate from the easternmost main line track. In addition to the engineer in the train cab, a conductor is needed to work alongside the cars to uncouple the empties and couple up the full cars for the return trip to Columbus. A brakeman works at the end of the train inside the warehouse. All communicate by walkie-talkie type radios. This night, possibly the 21st of October, the engineer, who we shall call Howard J. Albert, was sitting in his locomotive cab on the main line track. It was cold and clear. Several boxcars had been cut loose and were parked to the south of the switch track to the warehouse. The engine was coupled up to the rest of the cars, which were being moved into position within the warehouse. At about 3:20 a.m., Howard saw what looked to be a shooting star to the west. It curved down out of the northwest. He was sitting in his cab facing southbound. The first boxcar blocked his view in this direction. Light came down in the field toward Route 23 between him and the church. Slowly, at about the speed of a walking man, it came toward him across the field. It was approximately 16 feet off the ground and stopped on the other side of the tracks between 4 and 5 boxcar lengths away, 180 to 270 feet. Howard picked up his radio and called out to his conductor, who was about 7 or 8 car lengths down the track. Quote,
"Donald, come up to the engine."
Donald replied by radio and asked what was happening. Howard answered,
"Hey, we got a UFO up here."
At this time, the UFO had moved to within 2 car lengths of the track. The object was, quote, birthday cake, or disc-shaped, about 90 feet in diameter and about 45 feet high. It was brightly lit with banks of 9 vertical, quote, tubes, separated by a dark void space that reflected no light. Short horizontal tubes ran over the top and bottom of these voids. The bottom of the disc could be seen. It appeared like ceramic and was, quote, the color of a common kind of knife-sharpening stone, gray with a trace of lavender, end quote. No windows, ladders, antennas, or markings of any sort were observed. There was no sound associated with the disc. The disc was slightly tilted and rotating counterclockwise. Both Howard and Donald used their railroad stopwatches twice to time the speed of rotation. The speed was 9 rotations per minute, 9 RPM. They cannot say what was used as a reference point for the timing, but are sure their estimate was accurate. The object glowed yellow. Electric-like energy arcs ran around the disc in a clockwise direction. They were blue in color. As the arc touched the tubes lit up. In the center of the tubes were touched, the ends lit up. When the ends of the tubes were touched by the arcs, the centers lit up. At one point, the tower operator in Fostoria, hearing radio conversation between the 3 men, called and asked,
"Hey, Howard, you got a UFO out there?"
Howard replied,
Yes, Merv, we got a UFO up here. He's damn close."
Merv then asked,
Do you want the cops to come up there?"
The reply was,
"No, they can't drive up to where we're at, and if they do get here, they'll probably shoot at it. It isn't hurting anybody. We're playing games with it."
Howard turned on his train cab headlight for a 2 count and then turned it off. The object lit up very bright for a similar period of time, then dimmed down. Howard turned his light up twice and then turned it off again. The object reacted in kind and then dimmed down. Testing his engine, a General Motors Model 3900, he increased the output to 1500 amps. The engine worked. The object did not respond. The walkie-talkies worked, as did the base radio on the train. After about 22 minutes, the object started spinning faster and faster and got as bright as it had earlier when it had responded to Howard's headlight signals. Suddenly, without a sound, it took off up into the northwest until it looked like a yellow star. That is how they last saw it when they returned to work. When the object was close across the tracks, something told them that they should stay on the train and not cross the tracks. They also seem to know that if they blew the train whistle, the object would leave. Howard thought that the object's occupants were observing their engine, a relatively uncommon model, and in turn were allowing them to observe their craft. The conductor heard the radio description of the object, but only got up to the engine in time to see the yellow star-like object high in the northwest sky. UFOcasebook.com, 2009/1977, trainohio.html.
Interesting. It's very interesting what each person that has an experience notices about the craft that they're looking at, right? And how it changes with who's looking at it. And not that they all have to describe the same things, describe the idea behind it, but how the lady that was looking in noticed that there was cabinets, and that was one of the first thing that she noticed, because if she was looking outside of her home, more than likely looking through her window or whatever she was looking, there's cabinets around here, right? And she kind of can associate what's going on with her to the cabinets around her. And then these guys were train conductors, speaking in terms of they're 2 boxcars away, they're 3 boxcars away, talking about, what was it? The voltage, right? The voltage coming from the UFO.
Yeah.
And then how she described it was egg-shaped, or she didn't describe egg-shaped. She described cigar, right?
Yeah.
The UFO, the first lady. And then the second was egg-shaped. And these guys were describing it as birthday cake, right? Birthday round cake.
Yeah.
So it's like...
I didn't, until they said that, I didn't know birthday cake was a shape.
I didn't know it was always round if I accompany that. But you know it was the conductor's birthday, and he was pretty pissed off that everyone forgot of his birthday.
Yeah.
That's his little subtle reminder of that it was like his birthday.
It was birthday shaped.
Birthday cake shaped, Arnold. But I did see it.
Yeah.
It's just funny what each of them notices and how they compare it to each other. And I wonder if that also, if we talk about, when what's his name came to Congress recently. What's his name? Why we even talked about him a lot. Starts with a G.
Grush?
David Grush. Yeah. Thank you. It does start with a G. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
He came to Congress and he talked about, he didn't necessarily say they were aliens. He said they were not of this earth, right? Not of this earth, which was very specific way to say it.
Non-human biologics.
So making it, the idea behind it is how everybody sees these in kind of different patterns. And some people see them as the same thing. If we remember the Tilton UFO accident, I pretty much remember that all those guys came up and they started flashing the lights, remember, on their cars, trying to talk to them too. All that memory going, huh? And they started flashing their cars too. Gil's super happy. He's like a proud teacher at this moment because I'm remembering almost every UFO moment that we go through.
I saw the spark in your eyes when the flashing took place, and you were like, Tilton? Yeah. I'm like, Joey and you and I are close enough at this point. Like, I literally read your eyes, and you were like, Tilton? And I was like, yes, my child.
Yeah, because they were playing with it too, and it reacted the same way. But I don't 100%. Think that they ever did the honking horns either. I don't remember if they did it during that one.
I don't remember.
I don't think so. But yeah, I do agree that it is funny because they tried to start it up. They started on, like, turned on the engine kind of like a whoop whoop, like they do for a kid, and truckers would, or like train conductors would.
What year was that?
And it kind of did this. I feel like Tilton was like 78.
It was 74. I just looked up Tilton UFO incident. We are still literally the number one result because nobody's covered that goddamn case. I'm so mad because it's so fucking... Even my question on Reddit about removing static from police dispatcher Radio recordings is my number one result.
Good.
We're the only ones that got it. I feel good about that. I'm happy with that.
We have the exclusive scoop.
Yeah, nobody's taken fucking time to actually look into that incredible fucking shit where it's like, now you, now me.
Now you see. Now me. Okay, I'll try it. Now me. Now you see. 61, 1097. Stay down, Bob. Now let's try the spots. For the flashes.
I always wanted to see a UFO. Like, God damn it.
In our intro. In our intro, it had to be, because it's so good.
Somebody's sitting there looking at a fucking UFO. Looking at a UFO. Like, 50 years later, you are looking back and you're seeing them say that you know for a fact when they're saying they always wanted to see UFO. They're staring at a UFO. Like, I always want to see a UFO. And they're looking at one and they're playing Morse code with it. Anyways, sorry. Go for it, bro. Go for it, my brother.
No, I just thought it was crazy. The difference between how people see things and how their eyes perceive them, you know, and like maybe and when I was bringing in David Garush, I was thinking and talking about, I always talk about it as like interdimensional beings and things like that, because if they're interdimensional, they could be changing the way that we perceive them, or not even purposefully changing the way that we perceive them. We just perceive it the way it is because it's how we can understand it best. And when people describe it, and I guess you could also take that as they're describing it in terms that they understand, you know, and that the train locomotives and conductors understand, the lady, the housewife and mother, she's explaining it and thinks she can understand. And maybe if somebody else saw that and was like, no, those aren't cabinets, those are, I don't know, lockers or something, you know, like it can, terminology can change in some ways. So it's always people talking in things that they can experience. So I think it is sometimes hard to be like, no, that's not true. I don't think you saw that, because a lot of people, depending on how they, you know, how they bring it to you, some people try to go for fame just by seeing something. But coming back to it, it's like, you know, how is it, you know, if you've seen a UFO, which me and Gil saw, you know, the Brown Mountain Lights, and sometimes even now we're both like, Gil brought it up the last time we talked about it and was like, did we even see that? Did we see that, you know? And sometimes it's hard to like rationalize the things that you can see and the things that you have seen, you know?
Yeah.
Makes it very interesting. So
I thought, you got, and I want to say for the Ohio folks out there, at least one more Ohio story, because Ohio's for Loveland swamp monsters, apparently.
Loveland, Ohio monster. Yep.
Ohio's, all strange roads lead to Ohio. Or away from it, but it connects back to Ohio.
Yeah, it's just a circle road.
Now,
they call them roundabouts, Ohio.
Now, it's to connect to what you were saying, though, it makes sense. One of the best things that I heard very early on when it comes to witness descriptions and UFOs and sightings and all that is the more folks disagree with what they saw, the more folks don't have the same story, the more likely it is to be legitimate. It's very concerning when 16, 20, 30 people all say the exact same thing. That's like, did you all rehearse this? Because I don't know about you, but if you've ever sat together with a group of friends, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and tried to explain the same situation, every single person in that group is explaining and emphasizing a different part of that exact same experience. It's actually really sketchy when everybody says the same thing.
Yeah.
But if everybody explains it, the wood grain was like that. Oh, their shoes were like that. Oh, their hats were like this. How do you not remember the hats? Like that actually is more of a hallmark for something being legitimate than the exact same case. If everybody's saying the same shit, it's like y'all sound fucking brainwashed, or like you're intentionally making some shit up. So
yeah, you practiced it.
Yeah, with you on that. Yeah. Well, next up, this is coming from Humanoid Encounters: The Others Among Us, 1980 to 1984, by Albert S. Rosales. Starting off with Pat Norris, 28, had visited a friend in Mobile when his friend's husband arrived from work. Mrs. Norris left the headed home on Highway 90. She had turned off the highway, and when about 90 minutes ride from her home, she heard an explosion. At this point, her car began to vibrate and continued to do so, making it difficult for her to steer. She negotiated another turn off the road she was on, brought the car to a halt, opened the door, and leaned out and down and looked to ascertain if the transmission could have been causing the trouble. It had not. Mrs. Norris continued driving, and the vibrating stopped. She executed another turn onto another road and saw the woods were illuminated. At first, she thought there was a helicopter search in progress because of the light and was very frightened. She again stopped the car and, at this point, sighted a huge object about a half-mile west of her. She now feels the explosion she had heard earlier was the object coming down over the clay and gravel pit in the vicinity. The thing was huge, later estimated to be 7 to 8 stories. That's 70 to 80 feet high, and, quote, 6 telephone poles, which is 210 feet wide.
Another estimate.
Americans refute.
Yeah. Any form of measurement.
When shit hits the fan, we measure it by how far shit sprayed. We refuse to use distance of poop. We will literally be like, the average poop is about, but depending on what you eat, 6 inches to 2.5 feet. So it's about 12 poops long. And you're like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yep. Are we talking about metric poop, or are we talking about imperial poop?
Imperial, obviously.
Obviously. Freedom poop.
Freedom poops.
McDonald's and Burger King.
Oh my God.
There's some Subway in there.
The thing was huge. Later estimated to be 7 to 8 stories, 70 to 80 feet high, and, quote, 6 telephone poles, 210 feet wide, and appeared to be moving towards her at 4 to 5 miles per hour. The evening had been clear and cool, and she had driven with the car windows closed. After the explosion, she noted, quote, a chopping wind, a high-pitched sound, and a roaring sound, as well as a vibration. She particularly noted the, quote, whipping of the wind like a tornado. When the object reached a point fairly close, it stopped, and all of the noise stopped. It was completely silent, and Mrs. Norris lost all of the fear she had felt before. She then got out of the car to get a better look. She strained to take in every detail, feeling like a child with, quote, unbelievable happiness. She estimated the time duration of the sighting as 5 minutes. As the craft appeared, Mrs. Norris's attention was drawn to a top deck with a long window, which she estimated was 55 feet in length, and through which she viewed 20 to 30 persons, apparently oblivious of her presence, walking about as if they were changing shifts. They didn't give a fuck about her. The wall behind them was curved and white. There were no instruments. The people did not give the appearance of looking out. The beings were pale-skinned, dressed in white one-piece suits. She judged them to be about our height, 5'10". Quite slender, but with chests larger than ours, the top of the head more prominent, no hair, and having only the lower half of the ears. I don't know what that means. She noted nothing out of the ordinary with the eyes. What did draw her attention was the great grace of their movements. The atmosphere seemed, quote, sterile. Below this top deck window was an opaque window. The area around it was all white. This window was in sections and was inset. The glass was tinted. Below the center of the craft, a door was closing from right to left, and she looked onto a street that was dark, as if made of asphalt or possible concrete. Off to the side of the street was a tubular, rectangular equipment. All across the craft, she saw rivets and portholes. She said she could see the portholes, quote, inside out, end quote, as she peered into the craft. She saw some construction that included, quote, huge I-beams, like they put ships together with and beams holding the glass in there, end quote. The bottom side was tiered upwards. The construction reminded her of a ship or submarine. She said it seemed possible, very likely, it could have been constructed on Earth, exclamation point. The very bottom of the craft was formed into a cross made with 1-foot square mirrors, and an observation deck hung down and around the bottom with beings in it. In this case, unlike the top deck, the people were peering out, while overhead she heard a very low-pitched but clearly audible, almost like a growl, announcing, coming from the area of the observation deck now closer to her. Mrs. Norris said she believes they didn't realize she was there until directly over her position. She saw 4 pipes projecting 6 to 8 feet out from the craft, set in 3 or 4 foot square boxes. They had a hollow flange on the end, like a Hank cannon, and she believes, quote, it looked like a weapon. The craft took a turn as it went on from where she was parked. She said, staying in the wooded area and did not cross Highway 90 again. Possible that was doubling back towards Irvington and Pascagoula. It lit up the wooded area, and all beneath it, as it moved on and off, it had white spotlights, and to the side, blue and red lights that intermingled, pointing up to the clouds and then down to Earth. HC Addendum. Source: Bob Gribble, Phenomenon Research Hotline, and Ed O. Brown, Abro.
That's crazy.
I don't know what the fuck to make of that, but it's around the same time period that we've been covering everything else.
Again, it's interesting to try. It would be a fun game, or interesting game, I guess, to try to guess people's occupation by how they describe a UFO, because the way she described it, she sounded like she was either like a shipbuilder or in some kind of services, because of the way she described the like the naval deck, the deck on the ship, and then instead of like the way that she could tell by the way that like it turned, the UFO turned, that it became more menacing, and that it kind of took more of an attacking maneuver instead of being like at a passive maneuver. So it seems very interesting just to go by that on how they describe the UFO.
Yeah. There's a certain set of cases from the late 50s to the 70s and 80s where it feels like they're describing very, very human technology, right? And like when you look into UFO research, honestly, I'm gonna go out on a ledge. If you look into witness testimony before the internet, right? So I'm gonna say before the late 1990s, Not saying it was common in the late 1990s, just saying that's when the water starts to get cloudy, right? So if you look at any human testimony, any witness testimony before the 90s, and you start trying to pick things apart, after the late 90s, early 2000s, it gets really sketchy because you don't know what bulletin board they might have been on, right? What 30 days free AOL, like, transcript, 30 days free AOL kind of like disc came in the mail and they were on a bulletin board, right?
MSN.
Yeah. And there's two main directions that kind of like pop up. There's the rivets and windows view that kind of comes up. And then there's the Betty and Barney Hill kind of shit that pops up. There's the Betty and Dreesen type of shit that pops up. The aliens had a type, and their name started with a Betty, apparently. So there was some really crazy shit where, like, the odds of folks meeting each other, knowing each other, having any relation all across the board of, like, knowing what they were into, what they claimed, what they saw, crazy shit, like doors that just, just like the most basic of shit. It wasn't a trope. It wasn't a stereotype. It wasn't a thing back then. And then there was rivets, windows, cabinets. I forget the name, Project 1695, 1795. I don't remember. I've mentioned it on the show before. I probably have it saved as a PDF on my phone. There was an active project by the United States Air Force. I have the document. You can go to the Air Force's website. You can find this as a PDF where the Air Force has a projected view of a UFO with the United States Air Force like printed on the fucking UFO, because like this was they were actively trying to build UFOs at that time. Yeah. Some of these stories kind of remind me of that. This lady's stories reminds me of this. Similar to, can we get 400 Egg McMuffins in this fucking wicker basket in the the Wild West?
Mild West, yeah. The Wild UFOs, the Mild Mess episodes. Yeah, if you haven't listened to it, listen to that episode too.
A lot of love with that. A lot of love with that episode.
Interesting episode. But I hear you on that, because it's like the prototypes of UFOs, and especially when I was researching in that too, is like there are prototypes in the generation of it, and like the words change for sure, because it felt like the first early words are airship, the earliest words that I found were airship, and then I guess when flying saucer got coined, that became the preferred term, and now we use UAPs. UAPs are pretty much it, for unidentified aerial phenomena, because it's just the way it's changed in the way that they want to describe how they see things, but not get too close to what they think.
Right. Cigar shit has never been declassified. That's never come out. We've never had anything that comes close to anything like that. And it's something that even to this day, folks like Grush, who you mentioned earlier, and David Fravor have said cigar-shaped objects. Right? I think those are the legit ones, and I think the saucers are the ones that we're trying to mimic. That's my take on it.
That's a good thought. I mean, so when you talk about the name 1794 Project or whatever, that year was also famous for the Whiskey Rebellion in the United States.
That makes sense. Not really. What are you connecting here?
I also had a Whiskey Rebellion on Parapalooza.
I've seen it. Yes, many people have seen this. Yeah,
the whiskey rebelled against me on Parapalooza afterwards.
Yeah,
but that's what I was connecting it to.
Rebellion of whiskey, some might say.
Which kind of worked, that it was the same taste.
It's fantastic. Now, we've got one more story. Joey, you've got a choice to make. You could take one of two stories. You can take Monroe Falls, Ohio, or you can take Florida Scoutmaster.
Florida Scoutmaster.
Damn it, I knew you would do that.
Of course.
Sorry, Ohio.
Yeah, we've been in Ohio for 2 stories. Let's go to Florida.
Half this show is always in Ohio.
Let's go to the Ohio of the South, okay? Florida.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. August 19th, 1952. D.S., quote, Sonny de Vergas, arriving at police headquarters. The officer noticed that de Vergas' hands, arms, and face were messed up, basically. The ink got fucked up there, but that's what the summary was. Yeah. A heat wave from a flying saucer. A sci-fi movie scenario? Well, not really. The following account still stands as one of the best, quote, physical trace cases in UFO lore. The United States Air Force certainly took it seriously, and so should we. Scoutmaster D.S. Sonny de Vergas of West Palm Beach, Florida, was driving 3 scouts home on the night in question. He turned off the coastal highway and down an inland backtop to go where one of the boys lived. After traveling about 10 miles inland, he noticed a bright light in the palmetto thickets. At first, he passed by it, but then stopped down the road and turned the car around to go back. He hesitated in doing this, but could not help feeling that the light might have been a fire, perhaps indicating a crashed airplane. De Vergas stopped the car and got out to proceed to the scene of the bright lights. The scouts objected, afraid to be alone in the darkness, but the Scoutmaster headed towards the thick brush not far from the road. Nearby, the swamps full of snakes, alligators, and who knows what other deadly creatures. About 50 yards or so from the road, de Vergas disappeared to the waist-high thicket. As he did, the first thing he noticed was a terrible odor. Using his machete to clear the way with one hand, his other held a flashlight to show the way through the darkness. He carried a second flashlight on his person. The boys, waiting in the car, could clearly see the beam their Scoutmaster's flashlight made through the brush. Knowing he was being tracked by his flashlight, he shined it up into the canopy of some of the trees as he proceeded towards the unknown source of the lights that had caused him to stop on the road. As he reached an opening in the brush, he paused momentarily to signal back to the waiting boys. As he did, he was suddenly overcome by an intensely humid heat. He glanced up into the clear night sky to get his bearings, but to his surprise, many stars he had seen only a few moments ago were gone directly above him. Something else was blocking his view. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust to a large, oval object which was hovering about 30 feet above him. As he slowly moved away from the frightening sight, he shined his flashlight toward the object. He could now make out the concave bottom of a smooth, round craft with a dome on top. He continued to slowly move back from the object until he heard a sound which froze him in his tracks. The sound he heard was a large metal door closing. He now found himself surrounded by a red mist. He then lost consciousness. The 3 boys, Bobby Ruffing, Chuck Stevens, and David Rowan, could see their role model surrounded by what they could best describe as a big red ball of fire. Frightened, they left the car and ran as fast as they could down the road to a house. Finding a farmer, they told him what they had seen. The farmer quickly called the state police, who soon arrived at the scene. Deputy Sheriff Mott Parton picked the boys up and drove back to the car. As they arrived, they saw De Vergas racing from the wooded area. Parton said that De Vergas was more scared than anyone he had ever seen. The other officers ran into the area vacated by the frightened Scoutmaster, finding one of his flashlights still burning. They also noticed that the grass was flattened near the flashlight. The Master's second flashlight would never be found. D.S. Sonny Vergas arriving at the police station headquarters, the officers noticed that De Vergas's hands, arms, face, and cap were all burned, although the officers were doubtful of the red mist account. We believe the rest, the Scoutmaster's account, enough to call the Air Force. Edward J. Ruppelt was heading the Air Force's Project Blue Book at the time. He was impressed enough to take an investigative group to Florida to question De Vergas. He was accompanied by Second Lieutenant Robert M. Olson and two captains, Hoey and Davis. Ruppelt would interview De Vergas several times and remarked that the Scoutmaster remembered details very well and did not respond in a rehearsed manner. He felt that De Vergas was telling the truth. An Air Force surgeon did an examination on De Vergas and determined that his wounds were indicative of a mild sunburn. There were singed hairs, burns on his face and arms, and also his nostrils showed signs of being burned by a, quote, flash heat source, end quote. At the scene of the event, Ruppelt could find nothing to invalidate the Scoutmaster's account. Although there were no apparent signs of scorched earth or grass, later it was revealed after tests in Dayton, Ohio, that the roots of the samples of grass taken at the scene were charred. Also, De Vergas's cap showed signs of being damaged by, quote, sparks of some kind. The three boys confirmed the cap had not been burned earlier in the day. After interviewing the three boys, Ruppelt was convinced that they too were being truthful. De Vergas's story stands today as a documented physical trace account of a UFO encounter written by B.J. Booth.
The old Booth himself. Well, it seemed like the aliens were probably LA Dodger fans and he was wearing a New York Yankees caps.
No, my current working theory is that some of these early encounters, especially in the late 50s, early 60s, maybe into the 70s, particularly the ones with very intense radiation burns, I think those were human, more or less, U.S. government made. 100%.
Makes sense.
Yep. Those are my, I think that they were fucking up. They were trying to run some experimental craft, and they were like, ooh, whoa, and they, shot over to the other end of the planet, whoa, and they, crashed in the swamp, and they're like, oh, shit, send in, we need help.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't that the government was so...
Send in the scouts.
Yeah, it wasn't that the government was so quick to respond, and, the cleanup crews were we're so fucking on it. We were watching the radar 24/7. Our men were ready to go. It's that they were part of the crew already. They were watching the test flights already. They knew 6 hours away, a horrible crash already happened, and they needed to get there to help clean it up and figure out what the fuck was going on and get all of their experiments off of the scene, which is why they were constantly there. So I don't I'm not going to give credit to the government for competence. I'm sorry. Just
that's the last thing you should ever do.
Maybe I'm crazy, but that just doesn't seem like a thing. But if it's already a government project and it's already literally on the radar and they're already literally watching it and they already literally have a fucking team that's ready to go respond, I believe that. I believe that they closed down highways. I believe that they did a lot of fucked up shit. I believe they told a lot of people to shut the fuck up. You didn't see anything. Like, I 100% believe that. Bro, you're involved in those kind of programs, especially at that time. Bro, you could tell anybody to shut the fuck up whenever you want to.
Yeah. You'll disappear.
But do I think that's every event? No, because this shit's been going on since before the U.S. government existed.
Well, they had to learn how to make those airplanes and those UFOs from somewhere.
Well, I mean, but the simple truth is, like, this shit, back to Ezekiel's wheel, you know what I'm saying? Like, go back to the Bible, homie. Like, it goes back before that. This has been a thing for so fucking long. And it's... I think that we finally got to a point in technology where we could recognize and have the privilege of paying attention to what we recognized. I think that moment happened and we're like, we need to start working on that. Because even if we can't do it perfectly, we can freak out the governments that are keeping it secret.
But better.
We know how afraid these other governments are of even coming open about this shit. And if we show up and they think that we're them, they're going to let us do whatever we want. I think we copied it. I think we mimicked it. I think we realized that we can't copy it. And I think we backed the fuck off, which I think that's why a lot of these disc stories are dropping down. Accounts have dropped down. And now it's come down to just cigar-shaped craft. It's come down to just the gimbal videos. It's come down to just Grush and Fravor and Dietrich and all these recent cases, because, like, it's not every single day. It is common, but it's not every single day. I don't know. Joey, where you at, bud?
Or maybe they have figured it out and they're successful.
Yeah.
And now you have less occurrences of being seen because they are successful.
Yeah.
In cloaking technologies and multi-dimensional travel, all that kind of stuff. Maybe. I'm not.
Yeah.
The reason why it says I want to believe is because I'm skeptical about stuff, but still can logic weighs into things. So that's kind of how I like to live. So it's kind of perfect that as mine's I want to believe and Gil's I already believe.
Yeah.
So it's a very good name. But I always think about it like maybe they could have been successful in some ways because technology has changed and moved so fast, but human race is not actually capable of understanding or even being okay with a government that maybe had technology that could have changed the way we live at the moment and not releasing it to the public or private sectors that could make it available and affordable for everybody. I don't think people would be okay with that besides normal human intervention or human invention of the idea. You know what I mean? Like, people would be pissed if we got into, like, next year they were just the government or went, hey, we have been in possession of a energy machine that actually creates more energy than it uses, which would create unlimited energy, and we haven't let it out yet. People would be like, well, you are terrible. Like, that is terrible, right? I mean, of course we'd be like, hell yeah, we have it, great. But it would be like, fuck you, government, for hiding that, knowing you had it all the time. They would never say that they did that. They would funnel it out through a institute that they funnel money into. Hint, in the future of a topic we'll be doing, maybe, if Gil feels up to it. They'll be funneling patents out in the future. You should know what I'm talking about because he had planned to do it. Don't tell them the name of it.
I'm not saying it out loud, so the censors won't pick up on it. Here we go.
Yeah.
See if that'll... Can I get that on the camera? Here we go.
I don't know. I can't see it.
Hint there. Yeah. All right, brother. Bye.
Bye. I don't know. I like the idea of cabinets, and I was thinking about it as like, when were cabinets invented? They had to be invented in like 180 or something like that.
Don't want to live in a world without cabinets.